So the genesis for Trapologists at Work was, my father was obsessed in studying effectiveness. And you have the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People book, as people know, and his whole study around effectiveness and effective people. I was also very interested in the topic around success and failure. And I studied that extensively. Why are some people successful? Why do some people fail? What gets in the way? I also played chess. I think many of you, play in the game of chess. I think it's a great game for your mind, developing your mind. And I noticed that in the game of chess, there's 2 main strategies that you need to do. One is you have to think several moves ahead of your opponent. Just to think one move ahead is not enough. It's not sufficient. You have to think several moves ahead. And secondly, you have to avoid falling into the traps that your opponent is setting up for you. They want you to fall into the trap, so that they can win the game. And I thought that it was really a good metaphor for life, Yogesh, is that there are certain traps that we fall into. They're very subtle. They're not obvious, just like any traps, like a quicksand can be considered a trap. You don't notice it, and suddenly you're in it and you're stuck in it. And I think that that's a really good metaphor for our business life. And so I looked at this whole idea of traps, and of course, being a Covey, you can't have like 5 traps, right? You gotta have 7 traps. So I actually started with like 30 or 40 traps, but then I whittled it down to the 7 most common modern traps, the biggest traps that we face in our life, not just from the US point of view, but globally. So the 7 traps that we have in this course called Trapologists at Work is really the 7 most common modern traps that we fall into in our work life.
Well, thank you, David, for that wonderful reply. And actually, when you were responding to my question, I started wondering in my mind, then what is your obsession with number 7, your family, your dad, and now you? Where does it come from?
I don't know. 7 is like a magical number. There's just some numbers that achieve magical status, and I think 7 is one of them for sure. I don't know, 7 days of the week. I just think it's a magical number.
Okay, thank you. I have had the pleasure of once meeting Dr. Covey along with Dr. Blanchard in the same room, and that day I still cherish in my memories. And that time even Marshall Goldsmith walked in, and I came to know that day they were very close friends. So I'm sure they will be missing each other somewhere. But the point here is I want to just ask before I let you make your presentation is when you look at the Trapologist, the philosophy, the text, the book, and so on and so forth. Why it's so relevant in today's time? We are having all the problems, pandemic, countries are struggling, economies are going down. Why you think it is very relevant in today's time?
That's a great question. So I think that we are challenged and stretched and pushed as never before. And as you guys know, as we've gone through this together, this global pandemic, I mean, it's just unbelievable, the kind of challenges that we face. And I think that, in the past we have a challenge and then we have a response, and now we have a new challenge. It's a harder, more difficult challenge. We can't do the same old response. Same old response is not going to cut it. We have to give a better response for the new challenge. And I think that one of the big challenges that we have is we're stuck. We're stagnant in a lot of these traps that are preventing us from getting the breakthroughs that we want to achieve. And so I'm a big believer that it's good to do initiative. It's good to do things that are going to help propel you forwards, like an accelerator on the car. But if you have also your foot on the brake at the same time as your foot is on the accelerator, you're just not going to go anywhere. And so this whole course is about how do we take our foot off of the brake, and what are those traps that we have maybe fallen into that is preventing us from achieving our goals or reaching our vision.
Thank you, David. I'll let you carry on with your presentation. I don't want to be a wall between you and the participants. But just before that, there's a very interesting comment in the chat box by Saikat. He also has mentioned something about the 7 numbers in Indian mythology and Indian, sages and the rishis, the way we call them. Maybe people would like to read that as well. But again, welcome to you, David.
Yeah, I want to hear that. What? Because I'm saying it's a magical number, but give me the science behind why it is.
Well, there is a comment in the box, in the chat box by a gentleman called Saikat Kar. He says we had 7 rishis. Rishis are the sages in Indian mythology. And, there are, the Sapt Rishi, they used to be called as 7 sages in our ancient Indian civilization who were none but scientists oblique innovators. So, it's a deep rooted thing. And as per Bible, he says 7 is a complete number. So, there's a kind of mystical and of course, historical and spiritual, relevance to that number. And you guys seem to have picked it very well. It is working for you. And I'm sure Trapology also will be a great lucky number for you. Thank you very much. All over to you.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you for that explanation. That's awesome. So, so this course is called Trapologist at Work. It's a one-day course. I'm just going to give you a very, very brief overview. So I'm calling it an introductory webinar. That's all it is. But if you want to learn more about the course, of course, a BYLD group is certified and they have several trainers that can teach this course. And please feel free to reach out to them. And, if you want to learn more and if you want to actually go to the full day course. So I mentioned that I've been to India about 7 or 8 times, and this is a picture of me in 2001, obviously at your jewel in India, the Taj Mahal, and that's also my business partner Stefan Bardix. He's the SM at SM Covey, which is our company name. And I accompanied my father on 2 trips in India, and we were in Delhi and Mumbai and Bangalore. And my father loved his time in India and really appreciated the mindset. I think what's great about people from India is they're really big on ideas and they love to argue and debate and discuss ideas. And he was really turned on by that. He said the statement that we should live life in crescendo. Your greatest work is always ahead of you. And a lot of times I think sometimes we think that we've reached a plateau and we think that we've done our, the most that we can do. But if we live life in crescendo, we always believe that we have a greater work ahead of us. And I really believe that. Obviously, he was famous for the 7 habits of highly effective people. And so when I started off, it was interesting. My father started off when he was 50 years old. He left being a professor. He was a professor for like 25 years. And he left that to build his company and the 7 Habits and Franklin Covey was his company. And so he really focused around effectiveness. Like I said, my focus is really on traps and really the 7 hidden obstacles to success or the 7 traps. This is a picture of me in Thailand when I presented at UOB Bank. And I also presented at Chulalongkorn University, which was a business school in Bangkok. I presented in Amsterdam at the GTD Summit, and there were about 600 people there from 40 countries. And we have 11 licensees in 25 countries for Trapologist work, including India. So I'm very excited about sharing this message. And prior to COVID, I was in Thailand, I was in Singapore, I was in Germany, I was in Russia, I was in Indonesia. I was going to Japan in April before COVID happened. And I look forward to, as soon as I'm able to, coming to your great country and doing some live events. So as I said, many of our workplace challenges are caused by traps that we fall into unwittingly. We're not really kind of aware of them, but they're there, believe me, they exist. And there's a great model by Kurt Lewin. He was the American-German psychologist, and he talked about anytime you try to enact change, you have driving forces, okay? So you have the current state, and then you have the desired state. You have driving forces, which are trying to take you and propel you. These are like initiatives that we have. But at the same time, you have restraining forces as well. And these restraining forces are really the traps that we're going to talk about today briefly. But and that's really the focus of this course is what are the traps? What are the restraining forces? And I personally believe that the restraining forces, removing those is actually more important than the driving forces. As I said, I used the analogy in one of my answers to Yogesh's question. You know, if we have a foot on the accelerator and we have a foot on the brake, we're obviously not going to move anywhere. And oftentimes the answer that most people will say is put your foot harder on the accelerator. And I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is not to put your foot harder on the accelerator. The answer is to take your foot off the brake. And there's many of those brakes, those obstacles, those traps that are preventing us from reaching our goals and being successful. So today we're going to talk about really 3 breakthrough insights that's going to be discussed in this short webinar. To really enact positive change, there must be an increased focus on the restraining forces, the trap, versus another driving force. It's the point that I've just mentioned. The second is to avoid the 7 traps, we have to execute on new revolutionary approaches. The same old won't cut it anymore. As I said, we have a whole new challenge, and the old approach is not going to work. We have to elevate our thinking. Albert Einstein said that the problems that we face cannot possibly be solved by the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. So it's just this idea that we have to have a whole new way to solve the problems and challenges that we face today. And a trapologist, which is what we're going to talk about, trapologist is a person or a leader who detects and avoids 7 traps and also helps others do the same. So once you are aware of these 7 traps, it's amazing what can happen because you can know in advance, you know what, I'm kind of falling into this trap. And so you're aware of it. And with that awareness, you can avoid those traps and the limitations that they bring with them. So we're going to talk about how you can become a trapologist. And the course certainly talks about that. So as I said, there's 7 traps. 3 traps are really related to yourself as an individual. 3 traps are related to your interactions with other people, let's say your team. And 1 trap is related to the organization. In this short webinar, we're just going to briefly touch upon the 3 traps related to yourself. We're not going to cover on the other 4. And we do have a process. It's a 5-step process. You know, this is the process of recognizing the trap. It's quantifying the trap. The conventional approach is what the same old that I'm talking about, the same things that we've been doing that are not working anymore. I call that conventional approach. That's represented by the hammer. He that is good with the hammer tends to think everything is a nail. The epiphany breakthrough is represented by the light bulb. And an epiphany breakthrough, what it is, it's a new idea or a new insight that leads to a breakthrough in behavior. And then, of course, we have number 5, take action, which is represented by the rocket. So like I said, we're going to cover off a little bit on these first 3 traps. So let's look at the first one. The first trap, and this one's very obvious to all of us, is the busyness trap, is drowning in the thick of things. If you look at this picture, this woman is drowning in paperwork. For us, it may not be physical paper, but it may be electronic paper that we're drowning in. And when I say thick of thin things, there's some alliteration there for you. Thin things are really the things that are non-essential, the things that are not important, but we're in the thick of those things. Why do we fall in this trap? We don't filter what's coming at us. We fail to identify the things that deserve our focus, and we say yes to too many things. Many people have that problem. I've had that problem in the past of saying yes to too many things. So I want you to look at 2 futurists that predicted our current world and see which one you think predicted it correctly. Of course, you have the world-renowned British economist. This is John Maynard Keynes. And he said this comment in 1930. He said, "For the first time since his creation, man will be faced with his permanent problem, how to use his freedom from pressing economic cares, how to occupy the leisure which science and compound interest will have won for him, to live wisely and agreeably and well. So basically, he was predicting a future of, you know what, we're going to have so much free time because of technology and because of compound interest and science. You know, our main problem will be to decide how, you know, what to do with our leisure time. So that was his prediction of the future. Then you have another British gentleman. This is a gentleman by the name of Geoffrey West, and he said, rather, and he currently still alive. He's a British he's a British psychiatrist, and he said, rather than be bored to death, our actual challenge is to avoid anxiety attacks, strokes resulting from being accelerated to death. And of course, you know, you can look at your own life. You know, are you sitting around twiddling your thumbs, wondering what to do with your leisure time and having all kinds of extra money, you know, to be able to do whatever you want because of compound interest? Or do you find a world more like what Geoffrey West said, where is that you are seeing this acceleration happen in our life and how it's really, you know, causing you to fall into this trap? There was a study done that looked at the number of interactions at work. In the 1970s, there's about 1,000 interactions at work. 1970s, we had two ways in which we could communicate with people, either by the phone or face-to-face, or maybe by a letter. In the 1980s was the introduction of the answering machine. And you can see the interactions from work went up fourfold. In the 1990s, we had this email. And again, the main purpose of email initially was that people would send you an email and then you could take your time, you know, to respond whenever it was convenient. Now the expectation is someone sends you an email at 11 p.m. and then wonder why you haven't answered at 6 a.m. So the expectations of email have gotten totally out of control. And then, of course, we have the social media and all of the things that great technology, and there's nothing against these technologies, but it's definitely compounded the number of interactions at work. This study was done in 2015, and there's 30,000 interactions, and we're probably now at 40,000 interactions in 2021. Here's the bad news. The bad news is that they found that at work that 50% of it was non-essential. That means half of those interactions were really non-essential. That's really living in the thick of 10 things. So as you know, there's so many disruptions during these COVID times. You know, some statistics on it, 54% of employees have more distractions at home. We very much do. 40% of employees find it hard to focus on work at home. And 15% of employees find it hard to focus on work with everything going on in the world. I want to show you a little funny video of what life may look like in COVID.
Sorry, David, there's no sound coming. I think you...
David, there's no audio coming through.
I love this. This guy's on.
We can only see, we can't hear anything.
David, there's no audio coming.
Maybe
There's no audio?
Yeah, I think you need to share
I'm
the
sorry.
audio.
Okay. I don't know what to do on my end to make sure you have audio.
David, the suggestion is if you stop sharing your screen, when you reshare, there'll be an option to share a computer sound. So you have to click on that box.
Okay, so click on stop share.
Yeah, stop share first. When you click share screen again,
Okay.
there should be a box which says share computer sound also as well before you share your screen.
Share sound. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. I see that. Okay, let me try this again. And someone give me a thumbs up if it's working.
Scandals happen all the time. The question is, how do
loud and clear.
respond to those scandals?
And what will it mean for for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me. My apologies.
What's this going to mean for the region?
My apologies. South Korea's policy choices on North Korea have been severely limited in the last 6 months to a year.
Okay, I love this video. You know, the guy wouldn't even acknowledge his kid. It just takes his hand and pushes her back. Obviously, you know, we have families that live. I have 7 kids myself. Of course, I wanted to have less. My father said, if you want to continue to work for Franklin Covey, you have to have 7. I said, yes, sir, Father. And so anyway, there's tons of distractions, especially during COVID, you know, that we're having to face. And it's very, very hard to focus.
Scandals happen all the time. The question is, how do democracies respond?
So the conventional approach, again, the conventional approach is what people suggest is going to solve this problem to being stuck in the busyness trap, which is being mired in the thick of thin things, drowning in the thick of thin things. And the conventional approach is, hey, become a better juggler. You know, you just have to learn to juggle everything that you have in your life. So you want to feel like you look like this, and everybody else looking at you sees you like this. And then eventually you look like this, because even if you've seen a really good juggler, they cannot juggle, you know, more than 5 or 6 balls in the air before everything falls. And it's true in our own life. So the science behind this is, another word for juggling is multitasking. Multitasking leads to as much as a 40% drop in productivity, increased stress, and a 10% drop in IQ. We are not designed as human beings to multitask. And we actually get dumber when we try to multitask. So the epiphany breakthrough, this is the new way, okay? So I told you about the old ways, about being becoming a better juggler. The new way is we have to learn to say no. As I said before, we say yes to too many things, but we have to learn to say no to the non-essentials and narrow our focus to our top priorities. A lot of you guys know, you know, Apple and the great success, but it was interesting that when Steve Jobs came back for his second act, he came back to a company where sales were flat. The company was hemorrhaging cash. It was a completely unfocused company. There was all kinds of projects going on. Steve Jobs went and he drew a 2x2 matrix and would say, we're going to make 2 products for the consumer and we're going to make 2 products for the professional. Everything else goes. And he really narrowed the focus for Apple. And this is what he had initially, the iMac and the Power Mac and the iBook and the PowerBook when he came back in 1997, 1998. The current CEO, Tim Cook, has this to say about his company. He says, we're the most focused company that I know of or read of or have any knowledge of. We say no to good ideas every day. We say no to great ideas in order to keep the amount of things we focus on very small in number, so we can put enormous energy behind the ones we choose. It's not just saying yes to the right products, it's saying no to many products that are good ideas, but not nearly as good as the others. So if you look at Apple, the market cap of Apple, the market capitalization, what they're worth is $2.3 trillion, okay? They're the largest company in the world. And most of their revenue comes from 6 or 7 products, okay? The majority of it. Incredibly successful company that's come about through their narrowing their focus. So 2 books. I always mention books that I would recommend people read as they look at these. The first book is Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. It's a phenomenal biography that I recommend. And the second book is called Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less by Greg McKeown. Okay, so what are some things that we can do to narrow our focus and to focus on the most important things? Well, I think we can have a set time to look at emails. The normal person gets distracted all the time, and it's not very effective and productive. Maybe we have a set time that we're looking at emails. Maybe it's at noon, or at 5 o'clock, we can pick times. Some people have jobs that require them to look more frequently than that. That's okay, but maybe not looking at it as frequently as we do. We always should do our projects and strategic work in the morning. We should do that work when we are freshest, and oftentimes we don't. But that's something that we could do. And we should also consistently review our top 3 work priorities while we're at work. And oftentimes we don't do that. Okay, so let's look at the second trap. This is the procrastination trap, idling in the status quo. If you look at here, this is a caterpillar. And a caterpillar, as we know, builds a cocoon and turns into a butterfly, right? Not this caterpillar. This caterpillar is lazy. This caterpillar is procrastinating, building a cocoon, because that takes too much work, likes to just hang out on the log and just relax. And that's oftentimes what many of us do. We oftentimes lack the discipline that change requires. We find change to be difficult, painful, and uncomfortable. And we often fear the humiliation of failure. So we don't change, we stay the same. So the conventional approach is to delay until circumstances force change, then rely on willpower to sustain that change. How many people set New Year's resolutions? We just had, the start of a new year a few months ago. We set these New Year's resolutions, and usually we set too many, and then we rely on the willpower. We're going to say, I'm going to join the gym. This is going to be the year that I'm going to lose, 15 pounds. You join the gym, they make you sign an annual contract for the whole year, and they know that by February, you're not going to show up again, right? And that's often what we do, is that we delay those changes and then rely on the willpower. There was a study done with the commuters in London where they were offered an alternate route that would cut 6.7 minutes off of their 32-minute commute. And only 1 out of 20, only 5% chose the new route. Why? We're creatures of habit, okay? We just kind of follow what we've always done. So we change our lifestyle only when hit by a health crisis. The problem with that is that we're going to be in really bad shape. We change behaviors only when a relationship totally breaks down. I'm sorry, I'll change now. Too late. I'm out of it. Or we delay upgrading our skills until you're laid off at work, These are some of the things that we'll do in the conventional approach. So the epiphany breakthrough is to reinvent yourself before external forces require change. And it's this whole idea about changing before you have to change. I want to share with you a video. I don't know if you have Rocket Mortgage in India, but it's a phenomenal company. They have totally reinvented the whole mortgage process. So they sell home mortgages. And this little funny clip shows you how they take the complication that had existed in the past, added the mortgage process to their #1 mortgage provider now in the United States. So have fun watching this video.
I'm going to start with some balayage clip-ins, then razor cut up to a blunt angled lob. I'm dead, I'm back. It's going to be everything.
What?
He's gonna make your hair long, then cut it short to make it big.
Oh, okay.
What's the strongman?
It's a pea protein gluten-free pate.
It's a burrito filled with plants pretending to be meat.
Last night took an L, but tonight I bounce back.
What's an L?
The rap singer took a loss, and now he's okay again.
Right.
Every week I bounce back.
Living large.
Living with his mama.
Likes long walks.
Doesn't have a car.
Entrepreneur?
Unemployed.
Oh! Yeah, you can get a mortgage that avoids PMI, but there's no way to avoid MIP on an FHA. Now,
This'll help.
Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans makes the complex simple.
Right.
Understand the details and get approved in as few as 8 minutes.
there's also origination fees and escrow accounts.
This takes care of it, thank you.
Rocket Mortgage, America's largest mortgage lender.
It's just a gray dot.
Just a gray dot. So I love how they take the complex that has existed in this industry and reinvented it, and they've done this in the matter of 10 short years. It's incredible to think about how they've reinvented this. Okay, so 2 great books in this section is Change Anything. It's the new science of personal success, and Good Habits, Bad Habits by Wendy Wood, the science of making positive change that stick. And I just want to mention one comment from Wendy Wood's book, which is a phenomenal book. She talks about the way to make changes happen is you have to make them frictionless. That means you have to take the friction out of it. So, for example, she gives the illustration that if you want to exercise in the morning, oftentimes what happens, a lot of people have that as a goal. I'm going to exercise first thing in the morning, but then the alarm goes off and you're thinking, oh, I'm too tired. She says, well, why don't you wear your workout clothes to bed and then put your shoes and your socks right by the bed. So all you have to do is wake up, turn yourself around, put your shoes and socks on, you're ready to go to work out instead of having to get up and wander around and look for your clothes, your workout clothes. So that's taking the friction out of that change and making it frictionless. So I thought that was just a really good insight from her book. Here's some other examples. Maybe you want to reinvent yourself and become more tech savvy. I think that a lot of times, to kind of keep up with technology, we don't want to be maybe a dinosaur anymore. Maybe we'll not be in the forefront, the first mover, but we ought to try to see if we can maybe become more tech savvy. You want to learn a new skill each year. To learn a new skill, you have to try and fail and learn and repeat. And you want to be able to maybe read one book a week. I set a goal in the month of last April, to read 500 pages a day, as recommended by Warren Buffett. And I read 33 books in that 1 month. I can say that my wife wasn't very happy that month because I was reading about 8 or 9 hours a day. But it was a goal that I have. It's amazing what we can learn from books and information that are out there. Okay, the third trap, the ego trap, is maintaining a facade of perfection. And in this picture, you can see the subordinate is just handed in a report to his bosses, and he's got his fingers crossed behind his back, hoping that they don't see the mistake that's been made. And that's often what we do with the ego trap that we fall into, is we try to maintain this facade of perfection. So we don't want to risk looking bad. We don't want to step outside of our comfort zone, and we fear judgment and rejection. Many of you have social media. I'm on social media. What happens in social media is not necessarily reality. It's kind of like this false reality. And in fact, if you look at social media, a lot of times you look at people and they look like they have the perfect clothes and they're always on vacation and they're always doing these things and they never have any problems. Of course, that's not really the reality for all of us. But they want to appear to be, like everything is great. So the conventional approach is to limit yourself to activities within your comfort zone where success is virtually guaranteed. So that means that we're only going to take assignments at work that you know well. You don't try a new role that requires learning new skills. You only commit to jobs you've done before. The epiphany breakthrough is a totally different mentality. It's this mentality of trying, fail, learn, repeat. And in fact, the light bulb is a good example. Thomas Edison created this. And of course, that was the process that he went through. He tried different things. He failed. He learned from those things. And then he repeated until eventually he perfected the light bulb. Jeff Bezos called this successful failure. I love this quote from his 2015 shareholder letter. Jeff Bezos says about Amazon, his company, "One area where I think we are especially distinctive is failure. I believe we're the best place in the world to fail. We have plenty of practice, and failure and invention are inseparable twins. To invent, you have to experiment. And if you know in advance that it's going to work, it's not an experiment." So, maybe this is surprising to a lot of people, thinking this giant company, Amazon, one of their key tenets for success is failure and invention and experimenting and trying new things. Some of you have maybe had or used a Dyson Vacuum. And here's James Dyson talking about the process that was involved in creating the Dyson Vacuum.
There's a myth about inventors that all you need is one good idea and you'll make your fortune. But the fact of the matter is, you don't have ideas like that. Well, you start with a problem that you're having to solve, and you start building prototypes, hundreds of them, perhaps even thousands of them. And very often, the original idea or the original problem doesn't look anything like the final solution. So the important thing is this journey from prototype to prototype. And during that process, of course, you get hundreds or thousands of failures. And the failure is the starting point, because when something fails, you understand why it fails, and then you start to think of ideas as to ways you can overcome that failure. I mean, the cyclones for my vacuum cleaner took over 5,000 prototypes. That's 5,000 failures before I'd cracked it. So the moral of the tale is keep on failing. It works.
That's James Dyson. Moral of the story is keep failing. It works. So there's 3 great books in this section. Black Box Thinking. I'm sorry?
No, nothing, David. You can continue.
Okay, yeah. So the black box thinking, why most people never learn from their mistakes, but some do. The Bezos letters, where I took that Jeff Bezos quote, 14 principles to grow your business like Amazon. And then Outliers, many of you have heard of Malcolm Gladwell. He's a very famous author, talking about the story of success. And so anyway, those are 3 great books from this section. Here's some examples of what we can do in overcoming the ego trap and maintaining this facade of perfection. We can repair a broken relationship that we care about. We can learn from a successful failure. It's okay, failures are okay. And in fact, that's a big part of the Amazon culture is failures and experiments. But the key is to learn from it. Jeff Bezos said, successful failures. If we don't learn from it, then it's not a successful failure. And then we can try new approaches at work. So in summary, first trap, busyness. The conventional approach, what is it? Become a better juggler, right? And the antidote or the solution to the busyness trap is really to focus. Remember, learning to say no and narrowing our focus. Okay, trap 2, the procrastination trap. Conventional approach is to delay change. Okay, and that's human nature. Is oftentimes we say, well, I'm not going to change until I'm forced to change. So we just delay change. And the antidote is really to invent. Okay, change before you have to change. Reinvent yourself. Remember, I showed the movie on Rocket Mortgage, how they reinvented the whole mortgage business in the United States through their reinvention of their process and making it simple, simplifying the complex. So trap 3, the ego trap. And we have the ego trap because we want to try to stay within our comfort zone. We don't want to try to look bad, and we don't want to try new things where, we're not going to be painted in the best possible light. Well, antidote to that is really experiment. Trying, failing, learning, repeat. As Jeff Bezos said in his, as Malcolm Gladwell says in his book called Outliers, The Story of Success, we really have this 10,000 hour rule. You probably have heard of that before. And we have to spend these 10,000 hours to really perfect our craft. And there's a lot of work that's involved with that. So that's the summary. Let me just share one last couple slides, and then we'll open it up for some questions. So a trapologist, we mentioned this idea of a trapologist. A trapologist is a person who detects and avoids workplace traps and helps others do the same. Okay, so not only help themselves, but they also help others in their teams. This is my family. I mentioned that I have 7 kids. I have 3 that are married. So from my family to your family, thank you very much for having me today. And with that, I will turn it back over to Amar and Yogesh.
Yeah, well, thank you, David. I know this is kind of late in the evening for you. What time is exactly now with you?
It is 11:17 p.m.
Wow. Oh, well, thank you. We appreciate it. It's almost midnight there at your end. A couple of questions, of course, I'm sure people will like to ask. My request to you would be, can you also show again the slide with all the 7 traps? And without going into details, can you just refer quickly so that we get the complete picture? So these are very exciting 3 traps at personal level. But what are the others at team? And I know we don't have time to go into details, but just a snapshot of that.
Absolutely. Okay, so there it is. So as I said, and there's also a poster that you get, you know, when you go through the course. Here is the workbook that you get, and you also get cards. You have these reference cards of all of the information, you know, that you have. So busyness, procrastination, and ego is what we covered. So the 4 that we haven't covered is the trigger trap. These are really looking at the things that trigger us at work, that set us off. And everybody has triggers, okay? We actually have a trigger assessment that will help you evaluate what your triggers are. Some people know what their triggers are, but they don't necessarily have a plan to manage them. And so in this trap, we'll talk about what are your triggers and how do you manage them so that you can respond appropriately. My father used to talk about this idea of the space between stimulus and response, that there's a space that we have. And oftentimes when we have triggers, there's no space. You know, it's just an immediate stimulus and then immediate response, and there's no thinking and there's no space. So in this trap, we talk about what your triggers are and then how you can develop a way to manage those triggers. The next one is the silo trap. And this is operating as an independent at work. There's a lot of people that have still not looked at the higher value of interdependence, of we thinking and working together on a team. You see this oftentimes in sports teams where you have more talented athletes that actually have more talent, but because they don't work as a team, they're not able to accomplish and achieve success. Same thing applies at work. We have this silo mentality, and we have this mentality that working with others slows us down, and we can fall into the silo trap where we operate as an independent on a team. And so we talk about ways in which we can collaborate and work more effectively together with other people. The settling trap. The settling trap is really related to your career. And of course, you know, everybody has these different careers that we have. And a lot of times we lose our passion and inspiration in our professional work. And there's really 4 areas, there's 4 key areas in our life that matter. It's the economic, you know, the money that we're paid. There is there's the ideas, you know, that our mind being utilized. There's our heart, which is the passion part of, you know, do we have parts in our job that we are passionate about? And then there's the spirit, which is really about the contribution part, you know, where we feel like that we're making a difference and we're leaving, you know, Steve Jobs said, like putting a dent in the universe, you know, like where we're making a difference. And we really have those 4 areas in our life that are important. If you look at the body parts of those, it's really the stomach. The stomach is that we need to be fed every day. The mind, our mind needs to be utilized. Our heart needs to be engaged, and our spirit needs to feel like we're contributing and making a difference. If we got hit by a bus tomorrow, that our lack of presence would make a difference, you know, within that company. So we talk about the settling trap and how we can overcome, you know, the idea of not losing our passion and inspiration at work. Then we have the myopia trap. The myopia trap is both for the individual as well as the organization, and it's failing to see the big picture. This is the idea where we're too narrow, we're too myopic. You know, we're just looking at this small little piece of our job, and we're not able to see the big picture. One of the things we have that's unique as humans is we want to understand the why behind things. You know, I could say to someone, hey, look, I'll pay you really good money. I'll pay you $200,000 a year, US dollars a year, to dig a hole 6 feet deep and then to put the dirt back in. Like, there's one requirement for the job. You can't ask me why you're doing that. And you may, you know, say, oh, great, I'll take that money. And you may work at it for a week or a month or even a year. But after a while, as a human being, you're going to go crazy, and you're going to eventually come back to me and say, David, okay, I'm happy with the money you're paying me, but I need to understand why. Why am I doing this? And so we need to see the big picture. So as individuals, we need to understand and not be myopic. The organization also needs to provide a line of sight to their employees so that they can see the big picture and how what they do every day, how it connects to the organizational strategy. So anyway, so those are the other 4 traps. I just gave a brief summary that will cover. 3 of them related to the team and 1 related to the organization.
Well, great, David. Thank you for that. We do have a couple of questions, and we have about 8-9 minutes to go. I have a question here which says, any examples of trigger trap?
A trigger trap.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Let me read you some of the assessments. Let me tell you my 2 first. Okay, I'll make it personal for you. 1 is slow drivers. I know you don't have that problem in India, but I do. And so anytime I come behind a slow driver, I do 2 things. My strategy is I breathe. And then I make up a story about what happened to that person as to why they drive so slow. Oh, their mother must have just passed away. They must have failed the bar exam for the 3rd time. I make up some story, that helps me justify why they could possibly drive so slow. My other trigger is that when somebody takes credit for your work, that's definitely one of the triggers for me. Is I take pride in my work and what I do, and when I have somebody else that takes credit for it, or maybe doesn't acknowledge my role in a piece of work, that's definitely a trigger for me. So let me give you some other examples. A client gives you negative feedback. That could be a trigger. Someone or something interrupts you while you're working. A coworker tells you to correct a mistake. You don't understand what someone is saying to you. You disagree with the coworker. A coworker asks for help. Unsolicited suggestions on how to do something. Your input is ignored or disregarded. A client points out a mistake you've made. You made a mistake. Technology malfunctions or fails. I've found a lot of videos where people get so frustrated with technology that they take a bat and they hit in their computer. I know technology failures can be triggers. A coworker disagrees with you. You're late to work. You have something. You have to do something new or different. Hearing other people's music. Others touch you. Maybe the touching is a trigger. You have to wait for something. Your daily routine has changed. Someone takes credit for your work. That was one of mine. You don't finish something on time. Budget cuts. The meeting you're prepared for is canceled. Someone talks to you about something that doesn't interest you. Sitting for long periods of time. Other people are talking near you. You have to follow specific instructions, specific noises, certain spells. Okay. Anyways, that's about 30 examples. But we all have triggers. The important thing is to know what those triggers are and actually have a plan for how we're going to address them. So hopefully that was comprehensive in answering that for you.
Yes, David. We are running short of time, but there's an interesting question from one of the participants. My question to you, that is David, how to use trapology while doing decision making? There are many hidden traps attached to it. So
how do you practice trapology while doing decision making?
Yes.
Well, I think that what I ask myself is when I'm making a decision, am I doing something that is comfortable or normal in terms of that decision that's going to prevent me from getting out of that trap? Like I said, these are really hard. This says easy, but does hard. So it says easy. Hey, you need to learn. Excuse me. Everybody gets that. But how many people do that? Seriously, how many people do that? That learn to say no more often and to narrow their focus. We don't do that. So for me, the biggest challenge that I have is falling into the comfortable way of doing things, the normal course of doing things, the habit, of doing things. And I find myself that I can get stuck in ruts. I get stuck in the same patterns of habit, really was what it is. And it's very, very hard. You have to be very, very disciplined, and you have to be very aware, to do something different. I give another example. I use the example of sometimes, a New Year's resolution and maybe losing weight. So for me, I have 3 culprits that get in the way for me to lose my 15 pounds I need to lose. Number 1 is I have to exercise first thing in the morning. If I don't exercise first thing in the morning, I never do it. So I have to be disciplined and maybe even give up, an hour of sleep to exercise. Number 2 is late night binging. That's mean I'm eating a lot of food after 6 p.m. That is not a good formula for keeping weight off. In fact, it's going to add weight. If I can just stop eating at 6 and then not eat for the rest of the night, that's really going to help me. And 3, this hasn't been as much of a problem because of COVID, is I go to the movies. When I go to the movies, I get a big tub of popcorn, buttered popcorn. It's like comfort food, right? And that's so fattening. It's like eating 5 Big Macs. And it's not healthy. So if I can focus on those 3 traps that get in the way for my weight loss, those are personal to me. Those decisions are going to be more important than 10 of the things that I'm going to do. So I really try to focus on what are the traps, what are my personal, weaknesses and obstacles that I tend to run into that prevent me from achieving that goal.
Yeah, thanks, David, for answering that question in detail. Thank you. We are absolutely at the top of the hour, and we may have a question or two. Yeah, there's one more question.
Okay.
I hope we have time for that. How should one realize or know that he or she is already into these traps, and how Trapologist at work can help him or her to get out of these traps?
Well, when we teach this course, like I said, this is the guidebook, and it's a day-long course. We have a number of assessments, self-assessments, that help you quantify how big of a problem that is for you. And I'm not saying everybody has a problem with every one of these traps. You don't. Some will be worse than others, and some of them may not be a problem at all. And that's great if it's not. But what we do in the course is that we help you assess and quantify how big of a problem it is. So I think that you have to, take these self-assessments. You could also ask, your coworkers and your family and friends. I mean, they know us better, oftentimes than we know ourselves or what we're willing to admit. But it's really about, doing a current inventory, a current assessment of where we're at now and what changes that we need to make. And as we take people through this course, we say, look, focus on, maybe your 2 or 3 biggest problems. You can't focus on 7 or 8 things. It's just too many. It's like New Year's resolutions, right? It's the reason why people don't follow through on New Year's resolutions is they set too many things. So we really, really recommend the idea of focusing on maybe 2 or 3 at most things that can help that are maybe the biggest problems or the biggest traps for you. And specifically, what are you going to do differently? If you don't take any action or don't do anything differently, nothing's going to change. And you guys have heard the definition of insanity, right? It's to doing the same things over and over again and expecting different results. We have to really try different approaches. So I think that my answer to that is we have to really just focus on, the most important things. And, if there's 4 or 5 traps that are problems, focus on maybe your 2 biggest ones.
Well, thanks for answering that, David. So with that, we are more or less coming to the end of this webinar. It was fantastic, David. It was wonderful. You giving us the overview and the insights into trapology and what does it mean for all of us, and how can we kind of improve in terms of our personal effectiveness. So any other point or any comments, and then I'll hand it over to Yogesh for his remarks and observations, and of course we close the webinar after this. So
no, I really appreciate everybody's attention. You guys were a great audience. Thank you for coming today, and I hope to see you and meet you in person whenever that will be. I hope it's not longer than a year, but it may be a little while. But anyway, thank you for inviting me. And I love. My father gave me a book. It's called The Argumentative Indian. I don't know if you've heard of it or read of it, but that's what I like about India, is that I love that you guys love ideas. You love to debate and discuss. And so I hope that when I have my trip sometime in the future, we can have some nice, healthy arguments and discussions together.
Well, David, thank you very much. And no, you have invited trouble for you by openly inviting us for.
I know, I'm inviting it like I needed to, right?
But I'm extremely thankful to you and all the participants here, because it is middle of the night for you. And, I know that you take your supper and dinner early, and then going up to 11:30 or 12 is not a norm for you, but we appreciate that. Thank you very much. And, thanks to Amar and his team for organizing it, coordinating it, and thanks to all the participants. If there are any further questions which have been unanswered by David today, I urge you to, please send us through your contact person, and we'll try and get those responses from David and relay them back to you. But for the time being, signing out. Thank you, David. Thanks all of you who have attended today's webinar. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, have a good day, guys. Take care. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, David. Bye.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
I usually stay back for 5-6 minutes after the webinar in case there is any participant wanting to ask a question.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, no problem. I'm just looking through the chat box too. This is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, good comments.
Yeah, we had a lot of comments where we were synthesizing and asking you those questions, David. So.
Sorry to interrupt. There's a Karishma Gupta who has a question, Amar. She's raised her hand on the chat box.
Yeah, Karishma, what's your question, please? There?
I think she's muted, so she can't.
Yeah.
Oh, does she have a question in the chat box?
No, I don't see that.
Karishma, if you could request if you could put your question in the chat box if you can't unmute yourself.
That's it, I guess. Oh, Karishma wanted to say thank you.
Oh,
you're welcome.
You are
Karishma.
welcome. Thank you. Thanks so much.
So, David, we'll let you enjoy the rest of the night. Thank you very much once again. We sincerely appreciate it. And we also appreciate all the participants coming in today and attending the webinar. Thank you very much. I'll be kind of finishing this meeting and closing this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.